Hello, good morning, and many thanks indeed for joining us here on Morning Prime. It is the 14th of April 2022. I look a bit darker this morning. Of course, it's the break of dawn is still happening around me. But nonetheless, thank you for joining us. It's been a long week, and we thank the good Lord that He's seeing at least the tail end of it today, Friday, acting as a segue to the weekend. I don't know what you're planning over the weekend as well, but we thank God also for the good rains that are with us. The drought has been biting. We have news that, of course, 5 million people also are facing danger of acute hunger, and that is the reality that we are living in right now. We pray for more rains and good preparation as well, tilling the land and expecting a bumper harvest. Today is Uongozi today, of course, analyzing what has been happening during the week. You know what has been the big story regarding the Azimio and Kenya Kwanza coalition, or the Kenya Kwanza government right now, in regard to the resumption of demonstrations and even that constitution that has been put in place of a 14-member committee that will broker that bipartisan, of course, conversation regarding a raft of issues that have been raised by Azimio, and also Kenya Kwanza sticking with only one point as a matter of subject, which is IBC. I'll be joined this morning. Already in studio I have him. This is Dr. Isaac Kalua Green, who is the party leader of Green Thinking Action Party, GTAP. We also will be joined by Dr. Martin Oloo, who is an advocate of a High Court. We'll be joined by Churchill Suba, who is Executive Director of the Kenya National Civil Society Center. And we'll be joined by Kipruto Arap Kirwa, who is a governance and policy analyst. So we have a lot that is on the table. And man who is always donning green, Kalua, is here to tell us more of what he has actually been observing during the week. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you for joining us.
Great.
Yeah, he is.
Nice to see you in a green shirt as well, man.
Indeed, keeping up.
Nice. And you've been working
I didn't realize it's green until you just picked it in the morning. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but we thank you.
It's always a pleasure.
Yes, you started a tradition here. I don't know if I'll wait for the other panelists so that we can actually embark on it. You know what you did?
Yes.
A Friday before last Friday.
Yes.
So it's a good way to start the show. I think it's refreshing. Yes.
Yes, let's do it again.
Let's do it.
Yes.
All right.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity of giving us a fresh day. Your mercies are new every single day, and we give you thanks. We are here to be blessed of you. We are here ready to be used of you to be a blessing to the nation. Father, we pray for the leadership and pray that God of heaven, you'll guide this country into great heights, that we may submit to your goodness and mercies. And Lord, our blessings shall be in abundance because you have promised us such. Bless us and bless every panelist here today, that we may speak that which is of you and be glorified at the end of the day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. What a refreshing way to start the morning. Thank you so much. We'll be, of course, looking into a raft of issues, but let's see what is fresh off the press this morning. We begin with the bold paper. This is the Standard. It's back to streets, it says. This is on the front page of the Standard this morning. It's back to the streets. Parallel action, we have opposition chief Raila Odinga warning that anti-government demos could resume as early as next week, as Azimio leader seek to pile pressure on government through protest to run concurrently with bipartisan parliamentary talks. That is what we have as a splash this morning. And this story is well fleshed out for you on page 4 of the Standard today. And we have a raft of issues that have been raised here. If my director may just put it on the screen so that we can follow together. One, they want the return of demonstrations after Ramadan to run concurrently with bipartisan talks. And 2, Azimio to hold talks, hall forums and public rallies to report on progress of talks. Also, we have Azimio claiming Kenya Kwanza is not serious on talks, decry inclusion of Canaan N team. Azimio insists Raila won presidential election wants an audit of election service. Also demands overhaul of Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission election reforms. We're not doing this because of any weakness on our side. We are only doing this because Kenya is bigger than all of us. And that is why we want to engage. This is what Raila Odinga is saying. And on top here, we have also coming Health cover for hustler at 17 shillings. Government to roll out health insurance stemming from hustler fund via 17 shillings daily deduction. Also plans education policy as well. This is covered on page 7 of the Standard today. Alama's dollar surges again. Dollar buyers pay up to 140 per unit in banking halls in spite of market interventions. That is another story that you want to follow on business pages of the Standard today. I don't know if you've been following the story of the dollar as it is, and right now we can see that the competition authority, or what did I see, from the Business Daily there, we try and get it. They will try and follow up. We try and just, yeah, the watchdog. It says watchdog starts probe on banks for dollar price fixing. That is CAK. There's a lot of shenanigans happening with the dollar as it is. Now it is going to 140. But I know also in that space as well, how has it been affecting you?
Quite a lot. The cost of importation of goods is high, and it just has a ripple effect.
Yes.
And for sure, when the dollar is high, when the cost of importation is high, it leads to so many other things. And we are hoping that things can work better, and that no wonder why we must be able to deal with markets and access to markets to our country so that we can be able to produce much more locally as opposed to importation. So it's a thing that is affecting all of us, and we believe, and I hope, that the action that has been taken, particularly in the fuel sector,
yes,
oil sector, will be able to bring down cost of the dollar as suggested. So we are hopeful. We are hopeful in every way. But the way to go is to export more and import less, and empower our people in that space.
Indeed.
Yeah.
This is the Standard, as you can see it. I was giving you some highlights about it. It's back to the streets. Parallel action. Opposition Chief Raila Odinga warns that anti-government demos could resume as early as next week, as Azimio leader seeks to pile pressure on government through protests to run concurrently with bipartisan parliamentary talks. Also, these were the issues that were raised. You may be intimately familiar with some of them. Return of demonstration after Ramadan to run concurrently with bipartisan talks. Azimio to hold town hall forums and public rallies to report, quote-unquote, on progress of talks. Also, Azimio claims Kenya Kwanza is not serious on talks. Decry inclusion of Canaan in team. Azimio insists Raila won presidential election, wants an audit of election servers, demands overhaul of Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission election reforms. We are not doing this because of any weakness on our side. We are only doing this because Kenya is bigger than all of us, and that is why we want to engage. That is a Standard. On top here, coming, health cover for hustler at 17 shillings. Government to roll out health insurance stemming from hustler funds via 17 shillings daily deduction. Plans deduction, audit plans education policy also is in the works. This is what Dr. Green was talking about. Alama's dollar surges again. Dollar buyers pay up to 140 per unit in banking halls in spite of market intervention. And also remember, you have the Polls magazine coming in your way. If you're young and young at heart, you can actually follow or pick up a pull-out magazine inside the Standard as well. The Daily Nation, Eldoret farm in eye of 10 billion shillings fertilizer probe is a splash today. Investigation Financial Reporting Center and Central Bank combing through farm's activities. Scandal? That is a biting question that is asked there on the sub-headline. After winning multi-billion shilling tender to supply subsidized fertilizer to the Kenya National Trading Corporation, company has raised eyebrows with large and unexplained cash withdrawals and seemingly altered documents supporting big money transactions. This story is on page 10 of the Daily Nation today. 320 million shillings. Barely 3 weeks after the contract was signed, Mashambani received part payment from Kenya National Trading Corporation. Shortly afterwards, the firm sent over 320 million shillings to an individual identified as Alfred Rono. This story continues on page 10 of the Daily Nation this morning. Raila's blunder, Kirwa running mate intrigues that, it says here, opposition leader Raila Odinga reportedly became dismissive of concerns about possible electoral fraud after he was allegedly made comfortable with assurances of a win because the state machinery will ensure his victory was not snatched. His chief agent was not snatched. His chief agent in the polls, Mr. Saitabao Olekanchori, has said in the tell-all book, Why Baba is not the fifth. This story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Mashogu releases list of top schools in 2022. That is 2022 KCSE. That is a story that you can follow also on the back page. Education CS Ezekiel Machogu yesterday released final details of 2022 KCSE exams results as he defended his ministry against claims that there was massive cheating, insisting that the candidates deserved the results they got. You can follow this on the back page of the Daily Nation. I don't trust Ruto. Top UN official says in leaked papers. The UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed is said to have told her boss Antonio Guterres that President William Ruto is ruthless and that she does not trust him, according to Pentagon leaks. And this story is on page 3 of the Daily Nation. On Pentagon leaks, I think the young man has been nabbed there as a suspect. That is a 20-year-old, or in his 20s, they say. And you can follow the story also inside the page. That is page 3 of the Daily Nation today. As we to resume mass action after Ramadan, this is what Raila is saying. And that's how the Daily Nation looks today. Raila's chief agent, how Uhuru men struck it rich. Kanchori describes how some bureaucrats lined their pockets during campaigns. And this story is on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. Raila accuses Ruto of insincerity, announces return of demos. And here he can be seen holding court with the clergy there, Divine Strength, President Ruto, and African Pentecostal Mission Fellowship Secretary General Rob, with delegation of faith leaders at State House, Nairobi. And also down here, we have Azimio leader during a citizen engagement forum at Ufungamano in Nairobi on Thursday. Also, you will be fined 5 million shillings for leaking exams. That is a proposal there. You could soon pay 5 million shillings fine if found sharing national exams on any social media platform. This is after the Education Ministry made the proposal to deal with exam cheats. The ministry, together with the Kenya National Examinations Council, is in the process of reviewing policies that deal with exams malpractices. You can follow the story on page 8 of the Star. Kirwa boss is charged afresh in 14 billion shillings tax case. Kirwa CEO Tabitha Karanja has been charged afresh over 14.5 billion tax returns. The Nakuru senator appeared before Milimani Senior Principal Magistrate Esther Kimilu and denied 10 counts of tax evasion. The Business Daily is up next. Watchdog starts probe on banks for dollar price fixing. This is what earlier we were talking about. The Competitions Authority of Kenya is investigating several undisclosed banks for allegedly fixing foreign exchange trades, adding fresh twist to this crisis that has seen lenders run out of dollars on some days. The Antitrust Authority says investigations are ongoing into the possible manipulation and collusion over the dollar exchange rate, exposing bankers to fines and up to 5 years in jail if convicted. Sources familiar with the probe reckon the CAK is pursuing allegations that some dealers at the banks used, electronics that chat rooms and instant messaging to coordinate the trading activities when giving quotes to customers. And it goes on page 2 there. I think there's a preposition there that is misplaced. You can also look at the ticker there, where Kenya's economy to topple Angola as Ethiopia grows lead. Our Hustler Fund members will be made to pay for NHIF. Also, Kenya eyes KFC with potato seed imports. That is another story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily. I'll be showing you more of the dailies as we continue in Uganda as well, in Rwanda, also looking at China Daily and other dailies as well. But let's just begin from here. We've gone a full circle, we're back to the streets, and as I mentioned earlier, we are joined today by Dr. Isaac Kalua Green, who is the party leader of GTAP. Also, we have with us Kipruto Arap Kirwa, who is governance and policy analyst. We have Martin Oloo. Dr. Martin Oloo is an advocate of High Court, and we're joined also by Churchill Suba, who is the executive director of Kenya National Civil Society Center. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Martin, good to see you.
Good morning.
Mr. Kirwa, thank you for joining us today.
Thank
All right, it's back to the streets. I just want to begin with Kirwa because I think this is marked up in the middle of where you are. You as part of Azimio, deliberations that were happening yesterday in Ufungamano. You can tell us more. So today, back to the streets. You have mentioned after Ramadan. Do you feel in a way that you have been shortchanged in all these deals and the calls for negotiations or engagements in dialogue?
Yeah, thank you, Dibal. I don't think there is anything new. You remember immediately there was a discussion on the list of negotiators to be presented from either side. The president, in his usual style, with his deputy and the entourage, they went to Kwale ostensibly to relaunch a project he had launched when he was the deputy president. And from Kwale, he flew to Nyandarua. And it was all politics. So if there was any ceasefire that was breached, it is they who breached the ceasefire. And therefore, we are not saying we're not going to negotiate, but we will be informing people from time to time on the pace of negotiations. And as you know, many people who have dealt with issues of negotiations or mediation, you don't stop business when negotiations start or when they are ongoing, because all the time they are foot soldiers to do their work, and they are also negotiators to deal with the issues at hand. And negotiators, they also rely on a number of layers of negotiations. They will rely on technical people who will be able to inform them on certain nitty-gritty. They will also rely on the party leadership on either side. So I do not see anything serious that we as Azimio are breaching any of the rules of engagement, because even the rules of engagement, they are yet to set, there are timelines, they are yet to set, and we do expect either side will present their list of proposals. Of course, the other side has already said, okay, we just discuss on fixing one issue, that is the way to appoint the commissioners to the next
issues, yeah.
IBC issues. But I think Kenya is beyond IBC. There are many other issues that are critical, they are important for now and even in the future. As we said before, I thought we were going to do an audit of the 2010 Constitution with a view to seeing whether is it still answering our basic issues as Kenya. Is it organic to the very existence of our social dynamics, or is it something that we only copied and pasted from various jurisdictions, such as the way you do not have parliamentarians being in the cabinet? Is that the best model? And doing an audit does not mean we are going to amend. We are going to do an audit to see if it is fitting us, it's okay, we continue with it. That is the way I see it. Yeah.
All right, let's hear from Dr. Martin Oloo.
You know, the challenge we have is that we are in a game of musical chairs. Just listening to Mheshimiwa and listening to Azimio and just listening to our political class. One is that there's no sincerity, there's no honesty in terms of facing what the real issues are. If we want to do an audit of the election process, one, we require resources. This country at this moment does not have so much resources. In fact, what you'll be told is that it will take 4 billion to do that. You know, the figures just drop from nowhere. it's never about 100 shillings or whatnot. You'll be told 4 billion. And I've just dropped that figure because that's what you'll be told. But the more important thing here is that why go to a process whose result you already know? Already there are allegations that the servers may have been compromised. Already there are allegations that the process was not good. So if you go to a process, an audit process, when you already know what you're looking for, then the answer is with you. The key question for us is to begin to look at what have we constructed for ourselves in terms of an electoral body. I keep thinking that electoral bodies or an electoral body in this country is an excuse. In fact, it doesn't matter who you elect or who you choose to be in one or in any of those bodies. Our attitude towards elections is that if you don't win, it has been snatched from me, or if for me to win, I must snatch it from somebody. Now, with that kind of an attitude, you have an election that is almost always contested, or everybody is looking for corners to be able to make it to the line. And so that's something we know. And I keep telling people that elections are stolen, elections are rigged, elections are compromised, because all you need to do, as much as in football, is to compromise the referee, or to find ways in which, once you reach the referee, for the referee to be a little lenient to you. And that way you can end up scoring goals through the extra time, which can be 10, 15 minutes, depending on what the referee decides. So it is an issue for us to accept that it's not about the body, it's about our conduct, it's generally our preoccupation with wanting it our way, no matter how. Our propensity or our preponderance towards subverting justice, subverting processes. And so with that kind of an attitude, it is not, and I can tell you, it is not about IBC. It's about ourselves. Unless we start speaking truth to ourselves and looking for truth among ourselves, IBC will always be a scapegoat. You have seen it from Isaac's book, his stories. Our politicians are always seeking to meddle with an electoral body, yet they are expected to be processed by this body. To that extent, we will always come back and talk about it. So Mheshimiwa will be here 5 years later saying that even the IBC that will be reconstituted is not a good one, because we don't want an IBC that works. That is our problem as a country.
All right. We have also Churchill Suba. Churchill was in the meeting, weren't you?
Yes, I was at the meeting.
I see.
And I was privileged to be tasked to read the resolutions that resolved to have the discussions go on hand in hand with the mass action related activities, not necessarily protests, but protests are among them. For the reason that reading the mood of the meeting, you get a sense that when the president addressed the country, I think on 2nd of April, to which the Azimio side later responded, you saw in his body language the kind of humility that was required to bring in some thawing of the hostilities that had prevailed. He was accompanied by his deputy, but one who later spoke as if he did not show up at the State House President's address, almost in his pajama, you know, and you know, casually. I think he was doing his own thing, some exercise. He had promised to do so to check on his weight, which is nothing wrong because it was on a weekend day. But then came the day for the selection of their team, and you saw the leader of majority in the National Assembly, you know, speak with his fangs out as if, you know, they were torpedoing their own boss. I mean, if your boss speaks with such, you know, humility, and for the first time, I think, since the elections were concluded, the president repeatedly referred to the Azimio Supremo as my brother. my friend. Those were the references. Only for one to later on see, people who were appearing to have been set up like, dogs, German shepherds on the process. And so, whereas Azimio and the civil society say yes, whenever there is a gesture for dialogue, it's always good for the other side to embrace it. But there already seems to be so many conditions being set around the talks, including on the subject matter. But I think what has angered the Azimio side is the fact that one of the complaints, and in fact the fourth one, that the Azimio raised was this banditry that is going on, not just in the North Rift, but in the political circles, where the ruling coalition raids opposition parties for more MPs, and then only to appoint some of them into the small team of those to be in the negotiating team. And that, I think, is what seems to have angered them and demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that the other side of government does not seem to be genuine in their call for a truce, in their call for dialogue, because when you call for dialogue, the agenda setters are on the other side. And you say, we have been hearing you say this, but you don't limit what you want to be talked about, yet, you know very well that, these are the same issues on which Kenyans went to the street. So I would blame the government side for, the turn of events, because they seem, even before the talks start, not to be serious about engaging the opposition on very, very legitimate concerns that have been raised. I've always asked why, it has been made to look as if the opposition is extracting anyone's tooth without the benefit of an aesthetics. Yet, Article 35 of the Constitution guarantees every Kenyan, every person, not just Raila Odinga, not anybody at the top leadership of Azimio, the right to access information held by the state or its agents, and that is required to protect a right. Now, the right that is being protected here is in the Bill of Rights, Article 38, on the right to free, fair, and regular elections based on universal suffrage. Now, that's the right. And you remember that at some point, the DCI, on its own motion, initiated, investigations into allegations that have been made by Azimio. One would have thought that by this time round, the DCI would be giving us an update on how far he has gone with the investigations. But why has he gone mute? Because in order to verify what the allegations that the Azimio side have made, they have to open the server. So somebody must have told him, stop it, because now you seem to be working for the Azimio side. So what is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult for the government? And every time, we have never had a response from the IBC, by the way, on this. Not even from the CEO. There may be no commissioners, but the Secretariat has the capacity to say, exactly, this is the server. But the response you get is from the president, from the deputy, is from the majority leader, that they have no key to the server. Nobody has asked them to open the server. The server is in the custody.
I had the minority leader saying that we have Venezuelans here in the country doctoring with what is in the server right now. So what are you doing as a remedial measure since you have this information? I'm not saying you that as part. Maybe this will be directed to Kipruto.
The party honchos are here.
But the civil society also, they've come up with a report that we've been teasing out here on still the electoral integrity itself. You can tell us more about the Gladwell Otieno's organization, that is AfriCorg, and if you're privy to this particular information, how then does it really strengthen the case of Azimio with the electoral integrity, briefly?
Yes, of course it does. You see, when there are all these allegations, during elections, civil society has over the years participated in very robust monitoring and observation of the electoral process. And that's why every time there's been a petition, you remember right from 2013, the petitioners were not just the opposition. Those cases were consolidated after, AfriCorg and a number of other organizations, unearthed, produced the evidence they had, and were lucky to have also, filed their own petition. And so it always happens, and that's partly why, the ruling coalitions or parties have always been, against the civil society, because there's always this body of evidence that civil society always brings on board. And so if you added what, these other groups are saying, then it really strengthens the evidence base that Azimio has to claim that indeed, there were massive irregularities, in some instances based on what we were shown yesterday, on the infringements, on the tabulations. It is a matter of taking 100 votes here and adding 100 votes there. It may look insignificant, but when it is taken from so many polling stations, and given the almost near insignificant margin with which William Ruto is said to have defeated the Azimio candidate, then you could see why the math does not add up.
Right. Let me just circle back to Dr. Green here and ask you, you see now they're saying we'll run the demonstrations concurrently with the bipartisan talks as well as it's, don't you think this is beating the purpose of the whole bipartisan talk that they were seeking? Now you run the demonstrations and then we have bipartisan talks which are happening. How does it take away from the gravity of what they want with the bipartisan talks, these demonstrations?
Debal, one of the greatest things that we've been calling for is an opportunity for these team members to engage. And already they are in that process. What we are hearing in the process is noise in one direction, wants and what needs to be done based on what the individuals or the institutions that they represent want. This is very healthy. The fact that there is some talk, the fact that there is some engagement, it's very interesting for me. And this is a process of negotiation that is going on. And we must appreciate. We should not imagine that everything has gone to the wild or to the dogs. And as they get into this position, Debal, we need to appreciate that there is a sequence of things that we all need to focus. We need to look at Kenya today and the Kenya that we need to have. We need to look at 20, we need to look at 30 years to come. The only other thing is that politicians will always look at the next election. And therefore, everything is overwhelmed by what must be done within the shortest time possible. When I talk about the sequence of things, the sequence of what needs to be placed in terms of order, I imagine 3 areas. The first thing, we need to organize Kenya. Organize Kenya in terms of our economic side of things, organize Kenya in terms of our social space, organize Kenya in terms of our political space. We are almost losing the opportunity of Vision 2030, which would have helped us to organize our country in the best way possible, looking at what is very, very important. As the talks continue, it's an issue of demands and sacrifice. What does Kenya demand us to do? What are we able to sacrifice? These 2 words become very, very important at the level of organizing our country. We have opportunities that can change the lives and the livelihoods of our people. It is not possible that a country with 47 counties, out of these 29 counties are in the arid and semi-arid regions. You always say 23, but they go up to about 29. That means almost 40% or more of our country, people who are suffering. How can we organize our country with access to market, access to things that we must be able to do? This is a focus that we must take advantage of at a time like this. The second thing, Deval, we must focus on empowering Kenya. Empowerment happens when there is trust. Lack of trust throws away any opportunity for one to feel empowered, for one to be able to feel comfortable in their own country and contribute in things that must be able to be done. What are these things that we must be able to do? What are we doing on a daily basis that's going to help us to get to the next level as a country and to be an economic power? The third one is the issue of security. Security happens when there are boundaries. Kenya has a boundary. When you're bringing up a child, the boundary is a yes and a no at the right point when it is required. What are these things that we are doing to ensure that law and order is in place, following and adherence to our constitution? These are the basics that we must be able to look at. And we, fortunately, must look at the future. And I believe it is not something that is just going to happen today. It must be looked at where are we sending our money? How are we empowering the counties? Are they getting access to funding in one way or another? Unfortunately, in African countries, you find that money is actually kept away from distribution because it might be used to hit the same government that is sharing the same. But can you imagine a future where money is not coming from the central kitty, but a future where it is the counties that are contributing a small percentage to the national county, the national government, so that we can be able to progress? These are the things that we now need to start looking at. We must not lose sight of what can help and can build this country to great heights at the expense of small things. There is space for everyone. There is a role for every person. What are we allowing that to happen? And you must not feel and make the president feel that he's threatened in his position. There is a role for everyone. There is a role for the opposition that must be given empowerment to the best level. There is a role of the government that must be able to lead, and we can coexist because Kenya is bigger than every situation that we have at the moment.
Adherence to the law, as you say. But when we talk about adherence, we've had people who we can call political prophets that even we've brought into this country. One of whom is Kirwa. And since Kirwa made his pronouncement and gave his report, it seems all these items that were, of course, teased out from his report, they've not been in any way adhered to. They've not been implemented at all. We're in this morass because we always come up with commissions, we always come up with tax forces, we call foreigners, and they come up with very good recommendations and solutions for the country that will bring sobriety, especially into the electoral system itself. Had we followed what Kirwa had actually given out, even with the use of technology, even the constitution of IBC itself, I think that was really teased out from Kirwa, if you just read fully what is in that particular report. Why are we always in a vicious cycle, yet there is solution in the middle? It reminds me of a scientist called Fabian, I forget his other name, who came up with the idea of the processional caterpillars. Remember the processional caterpillars that, they were going in circle following one another on the barrel of, on actually the top, that's a cyclic top of the cover of a container. They were going in circles, dropping one by one dead. Yet, there was food in the middle. This is what is happening in this country. We have already solutions for IBC in the middle. But we keep falling off like these processional caterpillars. Every year in, year out. And yet no one will take that particular action, that particular motivation to move forward and implement these things. Why are we here? And Kirwa told us we shouldn't be.
Well, I just want to agree
with Dr. Martin Oloo that underlying issue is political bad manners. That we always know the solution to the problem, but we choose the lazy option of not implementing it because we feel by implementation it will be very hard to fix the things that we want to fix in the process. And therefore, we need, as a people, to rise above the fray and decide whether we want some of these issues for Kenya. I will only disagree with the good doctor that at times when somebody dies, we do what we call postmortem. And that postmortem is not to save the person who has died, but postmortem is to assist us understand the cause of his death so that we save those who are alive, such that if there was foul play or if he died of certain disease, then we address the real cause of the problem instead of just massaging the issues as they were. When we talk of an audit of the 2010 Constitution, an audit of election process, we want to do a forensic audit to come out with some of the areas, because even up to now, if Kenyans were to be asked and if they were to be genuine, nobody knows who won the election. And that's what Kirwa said, that both sides were stealing and therefore the winner was not clear. But to either side, they knew their candidate had won. The ODM team, they knew Raila had won. The PNU team, they knew Kibaki won. And the answer lies between here and there. And this past election has the same problem. Now, to be fair to politicians, politicians are a product of our society. The way politicians behave is the way the voters also behave. Because at times voters choose to listen to the story of their leader and ignore any other story. Today the country is properly polarized. Those who believe in Raila, they believe Raila is right. Those who voted for the current regime, they believe the president and the team are right. And that's why you see a lot of bitterness emanating particularly from the two majority leaders. In that press conference, you would have expected that they will be saying, okay, the other side gave them members. Apart from the issues they want, we want also to put these things on the table. Remember, the president had written to Parliament to suggest certain amendments to the Constitution to provide for the office of the official leader of the opposition. I would have expected this is a chance to discuss a raft of issues. We've been talking about those who supported BBI and those who did not support. The president has gone halfway in implementing the BBI. Can we make it a constitutional requirement so that when he picks a request for 23 CAS, then he picks 50. Against the very suggestion he had been given that, okay, 23 would be reasonable. Can we make it a constitutional issue? The way the cabinet is done, that you do not exceed a certain number. So these are a number of issues that we look at, and for me, I may not be informed in issues of law, but I'm sufficiently informed in issues of politics, in the sense that some of the amendments can be made unfrozen. You freeze them so that William Ruto does not see as if it will give opportunity to Raila up to 2032. Then we roll out that particular aspect of the amendments that we require, so that we are able to play with the current situation, but we know 2032 is a period where some of the critical players of now may not be in contention, so that we give to ourselves a good constitution. Remember, the old constitution, the Lancaster product, was amended almost every year. There was an amendment from 63, starting with 1964, the amendment to block any member of parliament from crossing the floor without going for a by-election. because initially it was provided that you could cross the way. Now you find some Jubilee members, they have effectively crossed to Kenya Kwanza. And that amendment was followed by another one, even including the president must be above 35 to block Tomboya or perceived influence of Tomboya. Such that by the time we were getting this 2010 constitution, we had been doing amendments one after the other. That's why I'm saying it makes a lot of political sense for us to do an audit of this constitution. Then we create what are the immediate issues we can do with it, what are the mid-term and what are the long-term issues that we can do that people don't feel this thing is going to fix me. This is the way I look at it. And if there is any behavior change, it must start with those who call themselves they are the ruling administrators, they are the administrators of this country. Why do I say that? If you are to do from the 2nd of April and you do an audit on what Raila said, what the president said, you'll realize that apart from that Sunday, a lot of bad behavior has emanated from the administration of the day. And therefore, what Azimio is doing is to react. We are also political players. They cannot tell us not to address the people, and yet they are addressing every day, every church function is a political rally. Whether it's the one in Sorongai, in Western, the 40 churches, everything was about Raila. Whether it is all these other, the so-called church services. So my worry is that there is a lot of pretense, and at times people blame everything on Raila. Even if Raila was not there, the problems that you are seeing, they would be there. The fact that we are dealing with an administration that is very dishonest, and it is not because Raila is in town. It is because of the behavior of those in power.
Still, I wanted to follow up with the question of the talks happening on the other side and demonstrations happening on the other side. How will that really pan out and not really affect the entire conversation that you are seeking to achieve?
You know, demonstrations, town hall meetings, they are just like church services that you go and you substitute Jesus with Raila's name. It is like the launching of projects that were launched before. And you are launching projects knowing that there is no money in the coffers. 60% of the money that we collect will go to the debt. And we are collecting at lower than we expected last year. I remember in I think September, I think we raised the highest, about over 165 billion. But the collections have been under 40, at times 40%, at times 50%, which means by the end of June, we'll have collected less than the budgeted provisions for the new financial year. And therefore, this launching of these projects is either a gimmick or it is a way of trying, and even the truth that the president seemed to have indicated was either meant for him also to get a chance to go to the field so that they square it with Raila. So if they want to talk about, to have negotiations, they should cease making Raila the subject of every church service. That will be able to accept. And remember, Dibal, this issue started by them the first day poaching 26 members of parliament from the other side, because we started by Raila winning 27 counties and Ruto winning 20 in terms of outright win for the presidential candidate. Raila won 177 constituencies. Ruto won, I think, 161. But now, the thing is upside down. They have been poaching from Jubilee, from UDM, from all these parties that were initially in Azimio side. Why? What is the urgency? Is there anything that they want to do, a master plan to amend the constitution and allow the current leader to be president in perpetuity? These are some of the critical issues. And when a dictator is in town, he doesn't have to talk. You will see from the way he behaves. That's why what Suba was saying earlier on, the demeanor of the president, that 2nd of April, was the best he could have displayed after being declared the winner and Supreme Court affirming the position. But immediately after that, he was rubbishing Raila, calling him Mukanga, Muchawi, the other fellow. You know, at times, even if for nothing else, politicians, any competition will create enemies. But at times it's good to have some respect. And when you win and you are the younger brother like Churchill, if he wins against me, he becomes the father figure of this table, even you. But if you cease to be the father figure by accommodating those who have lost against you, then you are inviting them to the arena. And we were invited to the arena.
All right, let's hear from Dr. Martin. What you decipher from this. Are we seeing the consolidation of power? Are we seeing the making of a dictator? What do you make also of the multi-party democracy, where we have also the party leader here of GTAP, and this all-consuming, powerful, you know, party swallowing all these other constituent party? Where does it really take us back as far as multi-party democracy is concerned?
You know, Dibal, and that's why I'm getting very amused and I'm smiling. We are a country that has been around for close to 60 years as an independent country. But we also have a character that defines us. The character that defines us can be explained from what Mheshimiwa is saying. That when we came to independence, we had negotiated a constitution. We went to Lancaster House. We negotiated the constitution. We agreed it. We came. We held elections, and immediately we settled. The first thing we started finding fault with was that constitution, and we started changing it, not because it was good for the country, but it was good for the big man who wanted to consolidate power. So a section of the constitution changed because Jomo Kenyatta wants it, because Kanu wants it, and so on. So we decided decimating political parties. So we had a Majimbo system, we had a multi-party system. We started telling Kadu to cross over and decimating small parties, and eventually we had a monolithic party called KANU. Fast forward, street battles, liberation struggles, Section 2A amendments, eventually IPPG, and then the national dialogue with Kofi Annan, and eventually discussions and processes that lead us to 2010 Constitution. The moment when you hear us talking, let's look at the Constitution, let's amend the Constitution. What happens in countries like Britain where there is no official, where there is no written constitution? Do hear that we must amend this, we must amend that? So I come back to manners. When you have people with bad manners, such as we have in our political spaces in Kenya, what you see are symptoms of the problem. So, where are we today? We are today at a point where the current president and his friends look at this country and they like some things in the 60s, the way Kenyatta did it. They admire how Moi did his thing, want to go back there, they want to run a big party. They are in a multi-party, they don't run multi-party, they just want single party in their mind and in their thinking. They don't trust structures, they don't seem to like systems and processes. The whole thing we are talking about here was the reason behind all the liberation struggles we had, including the national dialogue. And I've said in this show before that the players who are the national dialogue exist today, only that they have changed shirts. In the national dialogue, we were discussing serious things, historical injustices. We were discussing serious things, electoral justice. We were discussing serious things, ethnicity and dangers about ethnicity. So today, we at that time said the reason why we got where we got is because Moi led us down the road of tribalism. Today, when you look at how we are appointing people, it is smacking ethnicity, political patronage. So a few tribes are hogging the entire public spaces, and now they are even hogging the entire economic opportunity. So when you look at a scandal, 10 billion, you're likely to find the tribe of that fellow. When you look at major mismanagement or major tax evasion, you're looking at looting of the economy by the same people that have also the other parts of the economy. They have the public service, they have the spaces in government and so on. But then we are continuously exhibiting the bad manners. So what we are saying, or what we should be saying, is that if this is our problem, the solution is not in the amendments we are suggesting. The solution is not in going back to our constitution. Because whatever we do, we shall find ourselves back there. Today we are talking about IBC. The other day we were talking about IEC, then the Interim Independent Electoral Commission. Before that we were talking about ECK, and that was Kipruto. Before that we were talking about Chesoni and as the chairman of elections committee. Before that we used to have civil servants running elections. But the approach and the result is always the same. The guys who are running elections during Kanu days, during Moi days, who are civil servants, had a clear agenda as to who they want to deliver, and so on. We have never stopped that habit in our politics. Today, if you are looking for electoral justice, it's not there. Not even in Azimio, not even in Kenya Kwanza, because we subvert democracy in our political parties. We impose leaders in our political parties. We essentially demonstrate no good manners in politics or managing processes. So what you want to apply at national level does not necessarily sit at your heart or at your very base where you sit. So all these characters, that's why we are back to where we are. At one point, Martha Kalua was on this side, and there were PNU hardliners pushing on the same thing. At that time, Ruto was on this side, Musalia was this side, Raila was this side. Now you have changed shots. You are on this side, Ruto is on this side, Musalia is on this side. The issues are the same. Now, we have never done anything about it, historical injustice. We had a very good process, TJRC. It was just a good process.
Okay, before we take a short break, so what I'm hearing from you is all this exercise is an exercise in futility.
It's a game of musical chairs.
Even if you call it a game of musical chairs, we'll go through the rigmarole, run the whole gamut, and still be back with another issue. So what you're telling us is this process, it will not yield anything at the end of the day.
Our DNA is such that...
So it is much deeper, yes, a festering wound that we need to address than what we are doing currently.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Why is it that people who have no constitution that is written are having systems that work for them? And for us, we're always having problems with our constitution, always wanting to amend it. What is it?
We need to rack our minds. We take a short break, then we'll circle back. Of course, we continue with that and more. We are, of course, looking at the current state of play, the stalemate that we are in as a country. What does it portend for us moving forward? We've been in this particular morass before, as I've said over and over in this show. But what is the prime solution to this? Is this just also another exercise in futility? We take a short break.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Race in and away goes Alvin Maruve, and he gets there. Greatest of all time. Lily Barkwin is the toast of National Stadium in Singapore. Samuel Onyango huyo.
Kwa ushindi nashukuru wachezaji, tumecheza vibaya sana.
Ronaldo shows class.
Predators live by instinct and conquer with courage. The power of Predator will unchain your animal spirit, keeping you focused and feeling fresh longer. With a fierce flavor that goes down easy, it's guaranteed to tame your thirst. Predator Energy provides the edge you need not just to survive, but to thrive.
Hello, mimi ni Stella Chepkoi. Kupata wimbo huu kama sikiza tuni yako, dial *811 *801 #. Shukran.
The smell of the chocolate just draws you in there. So I thought, why not do something like that?
Chocolate business is quite unique to the Kenyan market, and I think this is because we don't produce the cocoa bean. So how do you go about it when you want to set up a business here?
I had the time to actually research and find exactly where I could source the cocoa beans.
Which are the chocolate types in Kenya that one would go for?
People love bars. Everybody loves chocolate bars. So why not go for the bars? What we make also about the quality is that we don't put a lot of ingredients to alter the taste of the cocoa.
Kwa miaka mingi tumekuwa tegemeo kwa nchi nzima kwa habari za kuaminika, matukio katika nyanja zote za maisha, siasa, usalama, mahakamani, michezo, yote tumekuletea wakati ufaao. Na ndio maana tunakuboresha hata zaidi, kwamba sasa KTN leo itakuwa ikikujia kwa saa nzima kila siku. Hapa ndipo taarifa za matukio kwa njia inayokufaa zaidi, maana sisi ndisi.
Join me on this week's episode of Youth in Agriculture.
We encourage the youth to join the program to study agriculture.
For digital agriculture, tumewafunza kutumia smartphone.
What type of soil is really good for capsicums farming?
Capsicum will do well at soils that they're well drained.
How do you do farming without soil?
So this is a hydroponic technology.
So kabla uanze kazi lazima ujulie hali ng'ombe pia.
All that and more on Youth in Agriculture. Keep it right here.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Welcome back. You're watching Uongozi Today, holding court this morning with Dr. Isaac Kalua Green, who is the party leader of Green Thinking Action Party. Also, we have with us Dr. Martin Oloo, who is an advocate of the High Court. We have Kipruto Arap Kirwa, who is a governance and policy analyst, also the executive director of Kenya National Civil Society Center. This is Churchill Suba. Interesting what we're talking about today, but we want just to hear even the sentiments that were there on the floor of the House yesterday, and also the sentiments on demonstrations coming from Azimio as well, before we continue apace with our conversation here on the current state of play and stalemate that we have politically in the country. Let's just listen in.
Really shocked that a communication is done on removal of my position, a position that was negotiated by my party with the coalition partners without informing me, Mr. Speaker.
I have not yet even communicated the replacement of Honorable Sabina Chege. I haven't. And therefore she doesn't know whether her replacement will be from Jubilee or not. So it is premature to suggest that Jubilee is being punished.
Was there a meeting that was held? Were there minutes, Mr. Speaker, that were given to you as part of this communication? Were there signatures that were there? And how many members of Jubilee Party signed?
In so far as the removal of a whip or a deputy whip, it doesn't even require any minutes or even any meeting of the coalition. It just requires me, as the leader of minority, to communicate the decision of the minority coalition.
I want to reiterate and say, yes, I am a member of Jubilee Party. And Jubilee Party is the second largest minority party in this House, Mr. Speaker.
If Jubilee is in Azimio, she cannot continue holding the position.
We've been in this Azimio coalition for far too long, and the harassment, as has been explained, has become too much. They have suffocated our space. We talk of democracy, and there's no democracy in this side of the divide.
Leo kama umechaguliwa huku, wewe leo kesho na kuona uko kule kwengine. Mimi nitakuamini vipi kuwa mambo yangu ya ndani utaweza kuniekea mimi na wewe wakati unaenda kutembea na yule ambaye ni jirani?
If you look at this, all the Jubilee members have been removed from the WhatsApp group of the Azimio coalition, Mr. Speaker. That is the first demonstration that we are in the wrong coalition, Mr. Speaker.
Some of the people here who are being persecuted, like Sabina, sacrifice her political career because of this Azimio coalition. Right now, they are talking about choices have consequences.
Somebody who is in your coalition is propagating the ideas of other coalitions. Now, how will I allow such a person to come and whip me?
Remember, Mr. Speaker, at one point, when you were a senator, the same people conned you your position, and you warned them it's going to be noisy and messy. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to repeat again. And we will repeat again. It's going to be noisy and messy, Mr. Speaker.
All right, those were the sentiments from Parliament. Let's hear what was happening also in Ufungamano regarding the demonstrations.
Maandamano yetu inakuja. And me, I will personally lead it. Kuhusu bei ya kahawa, kuhusu bei ya majani chai, bei ya mkunga.
Kwanza tuko disappointed kwa mambo ya Monday wakati ulairisha maandamano. Hiyo lazima tuseme. Next time wewe kota kwa hiyo maandamano, wewe ongea na hao tuache tupambane huko street.
We are aware that Venezuelans have been here for the past 3 or so weeks. They were sent to come and try to tamper with the serve, so that eventually, if the pressure is too much on them, they can open it up, and then we find falsified records. Those Venezuelans, we have been on their track. We have been trading them. They have been able to escape our dragnet. The last 2 weeks or so, they were staying in our hotel in Federation.
Mheshimiwa Eden Keinan, yeye ni mfuasi wa Jubilee. Kwa hiyo yeye yuko chini ya kioni. Na ni makosa sana na ukosefu wa sheria ikiwa mnaweza kuchukua mbunge ambaye yuko pande huu alafu mkamchukua mkasema yuko pande wenu.
The slightest indication that the call for truce was not in good faith, then action must be taken. and the resolutions have already directed us to the action that we must take.
We have made it clear, if we see evidence of no good faith, as indeed is clearly demonstrable from their own actions and utterances at every level, then the Kenyans have a right to go back to the street.
Mazungumzo yaendelee na maandamano sambamba. Taa ya moto ni moto. Kwa hivyo sisi tutaendelea. Tunangoja Ramadhani ishi. Ramadhani kisha namna hii tutatangaza.
So the cards are on the table so far. Let me consult with the people. We have today's editorial cartoon in the Star as well. It's back to the streets, as you can see in the Standard. And just listening to those sentiments, let's just begin, first of all, from the parliamentary floor, where we see this heated debate. And they want now to, take back the position of Sabina Chege as a deputy whip, first of all. Party hygiene.
Yeah, I mean, this is what could aptly be described as hot air. Because members of parliament spending so much energy to defend what Martin calls bad manners and trying to justify things that are completely unjustifiable for all practical purposes. And it doesn't have to be, Sabina Chege has, for all practical purposes, defected. There is no way, it was going to be untenable for her. And I heard, one of the members say, how do you expect Sabina Chege to whip, members of Azimio when she's actually canvassing for the other side? She can no longer perform that role. And I think it is only honorable. Actually, it didn't have to reach this point where, the Azimio has to take action to push her out. She needed to say, I've moved on, and so I'm leaving this position so that the party or the coalition can see what, And these things, part of the reason they are spending so much time is because they come with certain privileges. When you are a whip, when you are, an official as it is, it comes with certain privileges, even in terms of priority of who speaks and so on in the House and so on. The Speaker is expected to give, majority side the first priority, then minority, then these other leadership positions. And so for her to still expect, yet every time she stands on the floor of that House, she does not speak for the coalition, the opposition coalition. And so we need to bring in some level of hygiene, and I think it should start with the individual, even if the party system is not so developed so far. The second thing I want to say is that, this constitution has a lot of things that remain aspirational. The fact that we do not practice them does not mean that the constitution needs to be cast aside, and that's where I disagree with Martin Oloo. That yes, we'll have the constitution, but what is the practice? We must always endeavor to uphold the letter and spirit of the constitution. And whether Kenyans themselves do not measure up, to these standards that we are talking about, I think it behoves upon the leadership to show and lead by example. There are certain things that if you went to America, my first time in the United States, I wanted to see the Congress building and so on and so forth. What I saw when I went to the Congress building were, people doing all manner of things around the building. You would think the building is not properly secured, but the kind of bad manners I saw being done by Americans. Yet even as they do those things, there are things they would not expect people in positions of leadership to do. And so those who are in positions of leadership will always be expected to walk the narrow path and demonstrate moral aptitude and character required and expected of them as leaders. So yes, we may have failed as a society, but we want our leaders to pull us along those paths that the Constitution sets out for us. We are a multi-party democracy, and if you read our Constitution, it's very, very clear that Kenya shall be a multi-party democratic state, founded on the national values set out in Article 10. And some of those national values include patriotism. So leaders should be asking themselves, is it patriotic of me if I were to leave the very party that either nominated me? In fact, ideally, Jubilee should be saying, because Sabina Chege is nominated, is it a blank check for her to do anything? Actually, Jubilee can take action that renders Sabina Chege not to be a member of parliament if they so wish. But they have not taken that bother. One of the complaints that people raised yesterday during the Fungamano Forum was how, the Azimio leadership seems to be tolerant of MPs who have defied the party, are voting with the other side, and brazenly, defend their position by claiming that whatever they're doing for the sake of development in their constituencies. And so the Azimio leadership was faulted for entertaining people who are elected on Azimio allied parties that have practically, crossed over and continually continue to undermine efforts by the coalition to fight even for the items that they are negotiating about. So we must always endeavor as a country to hold people in positions of leadership to account.
Is it tolerance or it's fear from Azimio? Maybe if you pull back, that particular rank from them and they go back to the people, will the outcome be the same?
I mean, you expect UEDA or any other party to win in Bondo? Do you expect any other party to win in Kisumu for the senatorial seat? Do you expect, in Awendo and many other constituencies? Those are sure bets. Perhaps they do not just want to open many war fronts. But if they were to dig their feet into the ground and say, you have defied the party and we are therefore recalling you and anticipating a by-election as to be conducted by the IBC, they will recapture almost everything, including Langata, and so they perhaps maybe in their strategic thinking are saying, we have a bigger battle now. We do not want to open so many war fronts, but there is a way in which they must, assert the authority and ensure that there is discipline within not just the individual parties, but within the larger Azimio coalition.
Let me come to Dr. Green here and ask you, yes, you as a party leader and seeing all these eventualities that is playing out in Parliament, people holding brief for, the other coalition, going, to have meetings in spite of what the party position has been, especially on the issue of deeming. How would you react if a member of GTAP went there and, of course, is seen to be propagating, as we've heard from one of the legislators, the agenda of the other coalition?
Values is what must be sold from the word go. The moment you fail to stand on your values, the moment you fail to stand on your manifesto, the moment you as a leader fail to show leadership at its best, then you are leading your team in the wrong direction. When it was time for elections, last elections, I had an option of joining whichever party or whichever part of the coalitions. And we went ahead at the National Delegates Conference. And the delegates said, we are a party that believes in our manifesto. We have not yet seen, as at that time, the manifesto for Kenya Kwanza. We have not seen the manifesto for Azimio. How can we go joining when we already have a document that is already clear and defines us? And it was very firm at the NDC that we are not going to join any side of coalition, however much I knew where I belong or what I can support. And soon after the election and soon after the process, when the parties, now the coalitions presented their manifestos, it was very clear. The team again, as the NDC, looked at both and said, okay, it looks like our agenda is very clear on one side. And we wrote a letter. My position on this is known in the public, which side that the institution that I stand for is. And we went full force because we believe that this is where it tipped the scale. We did not wake up. I have never woken up and said, we are going this direction as the political party. It may be a small party, but with all the values that are required as human beings to be able to deal with. And therefore, when you lose that, when you wake up and find that the political party leader has already taken direction and sides, you have a big problem, because then you did not consult. There was no guidance. There was no direction. That is, you cannot start calling for people to follow you when you already have taken a side without consulting them. The spirit of consultation. And far beyond that, Debal, I cannot agree anymore with the team here. What Doc has said, what Mheshimiwa has said, and what Churchill Suba has said. It actually brings out the importance of having a foundation that we must have in this country, to reconstruct, to reinvent our country, to reorganize, to empower and to secure. Because we are headed, the same problems that Kenyatta, the founder of this, the founding president had. He was talking about umaskini, ugonjwa, and what was the third one? Ujinga. How can it be that 60 years later we are still talking about the same thing? Every president, when he comes on power and into power, there is a big stop sign. Now it is no longer a stop sign. It's a big trench. You can't drive over. The road is closed. Why? Because we got to go back to the foundation. We must think about our country 30 years to come. And I tend to think sometimes it needs a president who is ready not to come back for the next, after treating, we need a Mandela situation. And it can be achieved in one way or another, creating that foundation. But the concept of unity, and therefore the inclusivity, is based on merit. How, as a country, can we deal with these things? We have an opportunity to make sure that we contribute to national development without necessarily undermining leadership. There's a role for the opposition. There's a great role for the leadership in power. Everyone has a role, and Kenya is bigger than any one of us. Our country expects us to go to greater levels that we can be able to achieve. Perpetuating economic instability is a crime that is not only so serious here on earth, but also in heaven. Our country has seen 2007, where we had such a huge problem. We have gone through 2017, where we have gone through so much and lives have been lost. We seem to be playing around with fire. We seem to be tempting fate by trying it again. We leave it there, 2017, we find that it was okay, now we want to try it again. You can't keep tempting fate. This country is more important. This country has got so many resources. This is a country that has got a future that is mind-boggling. I see an opportunity that is so unique for the president to actually now ensure what he has always talked about, and we must support him to make sure that the role of the opposition is actualized in the way that he has always talked about. We need to speak in one language so that we can have the leader of opposition in power. We are not just talking about Raila. Everybody has an opportunity for us to make sure. It's a rainy season right now. Who is concerned about this? Food production does not come because of rain. Food production happens because of water. When are we going to talk about water harvesting in our country? When are we going to guide people to make sure that they can change the situation that they are in? The economic empowerment that we need in this country is a practical approach, not just talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Green. Let me come to Kirwa here, and still also on the action that you've seen not being taken by the leaders, as we've heard from Dr. Green and also Churchill Suba. What is the fate of Sabina Chege in Azimio? Kenan says that they are in a wrong coalition.
I don't know which party Kenan came in. If it was UDM, the party practically... No, it was
Kenan is in Jubilee.
So practically, they are deluding themselves. As Suba said, Sabina Chege should not even wait to be told what to do. You cannot be a whip, and you are whipping your members against the very principles of the party that brought you to parliament. Kenan, is a businessman, and possibly this is part of the business, so I would not want to comment on him, because of course he has said at the end of this term he's going to retire, which I wish him well. He does not know retirement from politics. Will always be invited by other factors. But it is what Dr. Green has said, it is value proposition that we seem to lack as a country. Even the very foundation of our nation, you realize the things we are fighting were simple: poverty, ignorance, and disease. But across the border in Tanzania, Mwalimu Nyerere was talking about 4 U's: ukabila, and throughout his career, he fought tribalism. Udini, that it doesn't matter which denomination, which faith you come from, what we need to do is we get a good leader. Ufisadi, and finally ubinafsi. So when you look at the values Nyerere was trying to implore Tanzanians to pursue, they were higher in terms of hierarchy or values. In Kenya, it was about poverty. Poverty, you can address it by stealing. You'll still be fighting poverty. And disease is a simple action of the government to make sure that people are properly treated. We did not imbue in our people deeper values. And even when we talk of unity it can also be addressed by people ganging up. They unite to rob the bank. That is unity. But we should be talking about faith, about honesty, about integrity. Those are the higher values that you realize our founding fathers did not seem to have thought deeply about it. That's why the parties that we formed, one was KADU, one was KANU, it was unity, and it was unity for Africans. So it was sort of simply to get to power. After getting to power, they did not address higher values. Now, in what we call organizational behavior, the change of behavior in any organization can be affected by a number of factors, but the most important is the leadership of that organization. Once a leader in an organization is able to demonstrate that he is away from Fisadi, he is away from Kabila, he is away from Udini, he is away from Binafsi, that particular organization will follow suit. Remember the late Murtala Muhammad in Nigeria. When he took power through a coup d'etat, the following day, almost everybody was in the office by 7 o'clock. There was order in the streets because they knew he was a no-nonsense man. Of course, before he died, bad manners had crept back to town because nobody was there to ensure that that is followed to the letter. So what am I trying to say? When we have this national conversation, it should be conversation around values. And those in leadership, they should realize they are there to assist the nation to change in terms of behavior. They should be mentoring other leaders because you know the word called mentorship in English arises out of an elder who took care of somebody's son when he went to this war in the medieval war in Europe. When the fellow came back, after greeting Churchill Suba, he said, "Who is this other young man?" He said, "This is your son." So the man was called Mentor. Then he said, "Mentor, thank you so much for making my son a man of worth." And that is how the word mentorship came from. So when you get into position of leadership, you actually mentor people. People will copy you. You remember the president of today and the former president. In 2013, they had this design of untucking shirts. You know, they were moving in untucked shirts in rallies. And all over town, everybody almost moved in untucked shirts, those who were supporting them. So you see, you instill some kind of behavior change to your supporters by behaving in a certain way. So if the president today was to behave in a way that is mentoring others, even those who are opposed to him will feel shy to fight him. But when he goes abrasive way, his deputy the same, Kimani Ichung'wah the same, Cheruiyot the same, you elicit negative behavior from the other side. Because for every action, there is an equal reaction. That's simple physics. So that is really my worry. And just to demonstrate again that you can mentor people. During the late President Moi, you could not go to a government office without a tie. And it was not that it was illegal. But nowadays, you find people dressed like Martin sitting in an office. So these are some of the things that people copy from you without their knowledge. You know, because President Moi all the time was in a tie whenever he was in an office. And everybody copied that. Even those who didn't like him thought that was the official way of dealing with issues in the office. What I urge the current administration, as we deal with these issues, they should also demonstrate leadership. Demonstrating leadership is to behave in a way that they attract other people. I agree with the president that he needs to build a robust party. But a robust party must be not by cannibalizing other parties, but by making the party more attractive so that people move in that direction and others move in the other direction so that we build strong institutions. The main disease in Africa is that political parties are just vessels of individuals or coalitions of communities against the rest. Otherwise, they have not acquired institutional character.
Institutional character. I like the word also. I'm learning on the mentor as well. I'll go and drill deeper on it just to understand it as well. But you're talking at least from a point of view that the value system, they've not been entrenched in this country. We have it, Article 10 in the Constitution, but we've never really shaken it into place. I was just looking the other day where we had a Public Service Commission and they were presenting the president with the values report. And I've always been inclined to wonder, and I think I've asked it here before, where does this particular report go to when it is presented in Parliament by the president during the State of the Nation address? What do we do with these reports? Since even Mwai Kibaki's time? No, Mwai Kibaki was in, Uhuru from 2013, yeah, with the new constitution.
Is it the Bible? I want us to, there are two things I want to do on this show today. One is to convince Mr. Green, or Dr. Green, that the architecture of our constitution does not lend itself to having an official opposition. Indeed, the constitution we have today assumes that we'll have coalitions because it talks about inclusivity, participation, and so on. The problem in the constitution is the inconsistencies therein. And that is why I always have problems with these people who say they made this constitution. The constitution is a patchwork of borrowing of ideas from different countries, including South Africa. Now, the issue of values and the issue of even political representation is an issue that was borrowed without consistency. And what am I saying? If you have inclusivity, those values as we have them, it follows therefore that you cannot have a political system where the winner takes it all as constructed in our constitution. then you have missed what you borrowed from South Africa, which then, because of inclusivity, they go to mixed member proportional representation. So that balances out issues of gender, balances out issues of representation, and balances out issues of marginalization and so on, because of the nature of construction of that constitution. Now for us, we borrow, but then leave our bad manners in it, where the winner takes it all. So when the winner has finished, he goes and constructs a government that doesn't look like the face of Kenya, and he says, this is a shareholding, this is a company, so we just, only shareholders are entitled. When the constitution is not saying that, it's saying inclusivity, yet there's no mechanism in so doing. So that today what we are talking about dialogue is a natural consequence, or is something that should be a natural consequence of what our constitution desires. That any time there are issues of contestation, we must have a dialogue among critical players in order for us to get there. But then what I'm saying is, the borrowing that we did in this constitution and the patchwork that we've done with it gives us inconsistency. So when you tell me about national values, I want to submit that we do have a value system. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with the principles and values in Article 10. Why? Because those values are foreign to us. What are our values? And this is the character that you see in the Jubilee government, the Jubilee party in parliament yesterday and the previous day. Our character is built on deceit, deep deceit. So that what you see is not what is prevailing. So start with Jomo Kenyatta. Start with independence. The people who fought for independence in this country never occupied office. But the ones who did not fight for independence actually became the rulers and became the cabinet secretaries and became, because they're privileged people. The people who are going to school, the people who are being, shielded by the colonialists are the ones whose sons and daughters took over
the home guards,
the leadership. That's the word, but I'm not using it. Took over leadership of this country. So that when you look at it, the deceit starts from where Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, the father of Raila, says that you cannot have independence unless Jomo Kenyatta is here. Another deceit. Why? Jomo Kenyatta wasn't fighting for independence. He wasn't. He was having a good time in the UK and elsewhere. But the real fighters of independence were not here. So we started by constructing a nation based on deceit. And so when he arrived, the first thing that he started looking at is to have a problem with the constitution and wondered why it wasn't making him look like the queen. So he started changing the constitution to make him become the imperial leader. And that's why we talk about the imperial presidency. Because he wanted total power. He wanted total power. He did not want distribution of power. That follows us into Moi's time. Moi now concentrates power around himself very well. Now, when you saw the Uhuru government, the first 2 terms, they were struggling, essentially struggling. They were trying to resist the current constitution because it wasn't fitting them. And their struggles were there throughout. Because they defied court orders, they went against a lot of things, just because the nature of the understanding, the value system, was inconsistent with this constitution. Today, what we are seeing, Kenya Kwanza, Azimio and others, is the inconsistency continued. So that they are in government, but they are not sure how else to work. They are in opposition, they are not sure how else to work. So what I'm saying, we go back to what, when Churchill was talking, there is what Hans Kelsen, who is an Austrian jurist and political philosopher, talked about. He talks about the Grundnorms. And he said Grundnorms, yeah, Grundnorms. So you check that out.
Okay.
In his idea, Hans Kelsen says that law is a pure thing. That law is prescriptive, not descriptive. That it is not, you don't need to qualify law. It is what it says because it represents the Grundnorm. It represents the basic norms of a people. And that way, therefore, when you look at law, it should be without what he calls metaphysical. Now, I must teach you a little bit. It should be without alien concepts such as morality ethical issues,
values,
or politics and justice, so that the law is divorced from what you call subjective processes, because it represents the best of people. And of course, that is his ideas. It has other issues that you can look at. But basically what I'm saying, that we are lacking in terms of purity, in terms of articulation of what is best for us, what you'd call a grundnom. So that we are seated on quicksand to the extent that what we have in this country ought to be opened up and renegotiated. Today, you've seen just a simple statement about land and how people acquired land, leading us down the road where people are now beginning to invade people's lands and beginning to claim. That issue is here, even in Tigoni. There are people who feel that the lands that are where the tea plantations are and other, belonged to them, and therefore the issue of sanctity of title is coming into question. So that unless we go back to our basics and ask, what is this that we laid for ourselves? What is this foundation we laid for ourselves? And how do we reconstruct that foundation? Everything else we are doing is adding deceit upon deceit, and therefore seeing the character of it manifesting, where you can actually be a deputy whip of a political party which you don't believe in, and you go to the other end and you can come and face the cameras and tell us, look, what process was followed for me to be removed.
Was there any
That
meeting?
is impunity, but that is our character. Our character is manifest. When you look at Kenya Kwanza, when you look at Azimio, you see that character. If you give the same people the power, they'll behave the same way. So that these conversations we are talking about, dialogue we are talking about, these are...
I wanted to ask, this national dialogue that you're talking, when did it happen? So I can't remember us constituting as a nation, or maybe constituted somewhere, and we're holding a national...
the Bomas, no.
Was it a process?
No, the Bomas process, and indeed our conference, the process leading us towards our constitution 2010 had various episodes of conferences, dialogue, consultations on, including the Naivasha one, where now after the constitution had been agreed in Bomas, some characters in the name of members of parliament went.
It was confined to the legislators, isn't it?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Was it a public participatory national dialogue? Why should we call it a national dialogue?
No, give it to them. The people who went to Bomas were of all different characters, and they represented different stakeholders, and to that extent there was dialogue around this constitution. There was, and several ones. Whether you're and you see, the question is, what happened after the draft? For example, when you talk about the Wako draft that went to be doctored, it came out of a process, but again it went to be doctored in Kilifi. So that when you look at this, what is his name? I'm looking for Professor Guy. This document that now came from Bomas, again it went to be doctored in Naivasha. So that what you're seeing is a patchwork representing different interests, and that was one of the biggest mistakes we had in this constitution. The moment we allowed a cabal of politicians, partisan as they were, and by the way, one of the main people who were in Naivasha commandeering the destruction of that constitution is the current president in Naivasha. At that time, we wanted a parliamentary system. He didn't want it. He wanted a presidential system, true to character. So that follows it through. So basically what I'm saying is that we do have a serious issue. Forget about IBC. Forget about cost of living. Which country ever works against its own people? In other words, which country can have no program to feed its people and to bring down cost of living? Ask France. Anytime they touch bread, the tractors are on the streets and people are out there.
Thank you.
So every government and every state ought to be working for the best interest of the people. So you can't say that we want dialogue to bring down the cost of living. That is an oxymoron when you're looking at governance.
Oxymoron. All right, we have Taifa Leo, and I think we should be winding up on this as well. This is what they're highlighting today. Makabila matatu yashikilia similia 45 ya nafasi za kazi katika serikali ya kitaifa. Jamii nyingine zikimeza mate.
It is asilimia.
Asilimia. Nimesema asimilia. Asante. 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 If we just put it back so that we can just see what watumishi wa serikali kulingana na makabila taasisi 288, that's where we have it as well. But even as we're winding up, I think broadly what they're trying to highlight is the issue of the face of Kenya, even in the public service as it is right now. I wanted just to pick it from Churchill Suba to tell us more with the constitution, because people have been talking about the constitution of this government, the way it is currently, especially when it comes to appointments. Just briefly.
One of the things that, and I beg to disagree with Martin on this, that everything that is in this constitution is alien. What I know did happen, and that's why some of these things like national values, inclusivity are sitting snugly in the constitution, or appear to sit snugly, is because the Naivasha Pali changed the electoral system and came and patched it in the constitution in total disregard of some of the ethos that had been entrenched in it. Had they left, because the Bomas draft did not have a presidential system. And one of the issues that had been flagged out, and which was now for the committee of experts to sort out in consultation with the major political formations, was the electoral system. And so when they finally agreed on the presidential, the entire draft should have been looked at. But what did they do? They came and pasted the presidential system, the executive, in total disregard of what the other provisions said. But I do not disagree with Martin that even in our own African societies, there were no values pertaining to patriotism. In our own traditional African societies and communities, there were people whose role were to act as defenders of the interests. That's why we have all these warrior systems. The Maasai have the Morans and so on and so forth. I'm sure, every community had these people. That there was a way in which people deliberately, acted inclusively. Even in the eating, people used to eat around the table. The idea of around the table, people used to place food on the center. Food would be served in a tray, the traditional one. And everybody would, take their share, rightful share, of whether it is Githeri or whatever it was. All these national values are not alien. What I personally think has gone wrong is the practice, the greed that set in when we started aping the machinations of the white people on how to capture power. So we have a situation where the end justifies the means. I think that's where we lose it. So that leaders who complain that, my votes were stolen are asked, why didn't you also steal? I've had that question so many times. So much so that you think that, in some communities there are people who perhaps think stealing is hard work. And I've seen that argument that, when, for example, during the national debates, between the presidential debates and the running mates debate, there were people who, used to have an issue with Martha Karua saying, my counterpart from the other side cannot, genuinely account for his wealth. And people are saying, no, why you have been in positions and the capacity to steal. Why didn't you also steal like he has done?
And that's the value we are talking about. That's how we want.
That is the warped value that we are talking about.
What is our common value?
And of course, having been at the Bomas Constitutional Conference for 2 years, 2 or 3, 2 or 4, I came to the realization that what most Kenyans lack is the opportunity to do what they criticize in those in leadership. Because at Bomas, we would have a situation where every time ordinary delegates, not members of parliament, would be asking for more allowances. And at times you feel so embarrassed and wish that some hole could appear where you are standing and swallow you, and only to resurface after the debate is gone. So we needed to, do away with these bad manners that we have acquired. But in our traditional values, I'll tell you that none of these values espoused in Article 10 are completely alien. Unity. I mean, we all endeavor to be united. devolution of power. There was a way in which even the traditional chiefs and kings, shared power, consulted with a council of it. That's devolution and sharing of power. So these things are not completely alien. It's only that at some point we went and acquired bad manners from the West, and that is what is constantly distorting this. Coming to, this struggle for change, in his address to the nation on April 2nd, the president was sober enough to remind Kenyans that he himself has since written a memorandum to the joint chambers of parliament, asking them to consider certain things that could require constitutional amendment. The very things that he opposed and which were part of the BBI agenda. So what I see in all this imbroglio is a situation where, people posture, and it is all a matter of who takes the credit, who takes the credit. If we could avoid this habit,
thank you,
to be the ones being seen to be taking credit, I think we would better work for the betterment of society overall.
Yeah, at that point of imbroglio, I think we will be. We should be winding up the show. This imbroglio is.
With this issue of imbroglio,
I like it.
From a whole professor.
That good and norm, I'm telling you.
You see,
yeah, we should be winding up briefly.
With these imbroglio issues of Churchill Suba. By the way, he seems to have come ready to oppose what my professor is saying. The more he says how much he opposes it, the more he agrees.
And that's why today I'm not happy. I'm just letting him start and then he comes back to where I was.
So I think
briefly,
yes. Okay, we all agree that what we have been doing over time is superimposing what we call sanity today on top of what a crisis of sanity has been prepared before to create a crisis, because crisis in such a nation like ours is what creates an opportunity to get things done in a way that is very individualistic. And therefore, the result of this debacle is a huge monster with 47 legs, with a head that is so tiny that you can't even manage. You can't call the animal what it is. And therefore, we must go back to the basics and deal with what we have to do. And the result of all these needs, as I finish the bar, is in an abbreviation that has been said by one of the visiting guests now. His name is Dave Holden. One of greatest teachers and leaders from the US is visiting country. He put it in peace. The word peace he abbreviated. One, we need to plant churches and therefore faith-based institutions to make sure that they are working and they are dealing with the issues of the people that we have. The second thing is to deal with the empowering of our own people. How do we educate our people in ways that can be able to help them? And therefore equipping leaders. By nature, we are born very selfish. Everybody is selfish. And therefore we need to align ourselves. These things of ethical leadership and all this must be imposed. The third thing is having, and that is the asset, assisting the poor. How do we assist the poor? How do we deal with them? And then also working with the sick, care for the sick. Children are dying world over out of dirty water, malaria, and issues that concern others. And finally, the E is in the educating of the next generation. We must look at our strategy as a nation.
Thank you.
And add value where it belongs.
Wonderful acronym. Yeah, I would have given you more time to expound on it. But
exactly.
Let me just hear from also Kipruto, your headline thoughts.
Yes.
Your headline thoughts.
Well,
briefly.
I'll go back.
Being hounded out of studio.
I will go back to the issues of values. That in January 1962, 6 weeks after taking over power in Tanzania, President Nyerere resigned to build the party, and in it imbued issues of patriotism and the other values that we've just mentioned. And at the end of the 1 year that he had resigned and left Kawawa to run the show in government, he was able to put in the school curriculum to build the values from primary school, secondary school, all the way up to the university. It is important that if we have to do a turnaround, we have to do the same.
Thank you.
Kilifi draft, it was to outwit Raila. That's why they went to Kilifi. Naivasha draft, they wanted Raila to take another position, but Raila agreed, okay, that's what you want. So if we are doing everything to deal with Raila, then we are missing the point.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's leave it at that. Martin, very briefly, a one liner I'll appreciate. I'm being honored of studio.
It's good here. All I can ask is now, Mheshimiwa Kipruto Arap Kirwa now needs to clear his doctorate. He has good stuff to work on around governance issues, values.
Sawa mwalimu.
Yeah. All right.
Churchill pia enda some.
Churchill, I've got a doctorate, PhD. Thank you. Let's leave it at that, Churchill. Next time I'll pick up with you on that matter of imbroglio and Grundam. And metaphysics. I need to go and consult my dictionary right after. Imbroglio.
You need a mentor.
I need a mentor. Thank you very much for your valued company. Always interesting here on the Morning Prime. Being enlightened on a raft of issues as well. But on a serious note, of course, we appreciate the matters that have been put on the table. It's all about values. Values at the end of the day. What is really backed in our system as far as character is concerned? Can we change? We've built all the system on deceit, as Martin was putting it. Thank you very much for your valued company, guys. I really appreciate it. I've had a nice time.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.